Welcome to episode 5 of Disruption and Kindness. I'm Travis Swearengen, and I'm sitting with my partner, Caleb Monroe.
Hello.
And we're here to talk about brands, businesses, and how they impact culture. Roll the titles.
That was messed up. Well, hey, man.
Hey, bro. How are you?
I'm doing good. I
Yeah?
honestly feel like this week I've caught up. It's one of those weeks.
Yeah?
Normally, I ride this fine balance between like getting everything done and what can be pushed off
Sure.
just because of workload. But this week I actually feel pretty ahead. And that's a very relaxing Zen feeling that comes over me when I get.
Yeah, for sure. We've had some pretty big projects, and a lot of it's just been on the web end. And so
Yeah.
we're finally at this point to where a lot of the responsibility starting to get delegated out to our creative director, which is great.
Yes.
And so you're getting a lot more time to focus on the sales end of things, which is awesome. So it's really cool to see your schedule kind of stabilizing, and a lot of these bigger projects are starting to wrap up, which is awesome. So
So
I don't know.
how am I feeling? Zen.
Zen.
Very Zen. How are you, man?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. I kind of like we talked about last episode, like I've been trying to give myself a lot more grace, and really trying to really tap into like where I'm at in life, but also to kind of give myself the slack that I might need, like on some days, like if I'm not as productive as I am other days, I don't beat myself up, but I'm really trying to work harder and harder and still perform and still do good work up here too. So it's like trying to strike this balance between, if I'm having an off day, giving myself the, like, it's okay, there's tomorrow, it's going to be fine, the company didn't burn down.
Sure.
But to also be able to wake up early in the morning and get up here and give it my all as much as I can. So trying to find that balance is really hard for me, because I'm a really, really driven person, and I've been through a lot of just craziness this year, and it's kind of derailed me a bit, and it's made me less productive, and then I beat myself up over it. And so now I'm in this phase of like telling myself it's okay when those moments happen, but also still going like, yeah, but you have to show up and get it done. You have to show up and run a department. You have to make this thing happen. You have to take care of your clients. You have to take care of your partners. You have an employee who has a family. Like, those things are still not lost on me in the midst of it. So yeah, for me, finding that balance is really important. And that's kind of what I'm working on this week.
Yeah, I would say it's something that business owners just learn over time.
Right.
Because you don't have an employee mindset, which is I just show up between here and here, and then I can turn my brain off and I'm not worried about what's going on.
It's just not the same thing.
There's so much more awareness that a business owner carries for the finances, for the exact leads, the sales, the fulfillment, everything that's going to happen.
Right.
On the business owner side, you're very aware of it. And so it's easy to wake up already into stress and anxiety as a business owner. I've said this before to you, but honestly, business owners are some of the most stressed out and lonely people that I've ever met in my entire life. And people wouldn't know that on the outside, because what you have to carry as a business owner is this front of success, that you're making it, that you're crushing it.
Right.
The worst question you can normally ask a business owner, hey, people that are family and friends of business owners, here, give this a freebie for you. One of the worst questions you can ask a business owner is, how's business?
Right.
Because what they're going to tell you is, oh, it's going great. And they're going to cherry pick the best results. And they're going to be like, man, we just got this sale and this sale and this sale.
Right.
And what they're not going to tell you is they were up until 2 a.m. last night wondering how they're going to, make it through a pandemic and push an extra boundary, how they're going to continue to scale, whether the person and their employees, there's so many stressful opportunities that business owners just carry with them that they don't get a chance to actually talk about.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting to me when my friends who have been employed over the last several years start to try and go out on their own and develop their own company and build something from the ground up. I've had so many people going like, dude, this is a lot of work. This is insane. Like, I'm used to having work-life balance. And when you're a business owner, like if you're really getting after it and trying to grow something, that does not exist. I think work-life balance pretty quickly becomes work-life integration, and you just kind of have to embrace it. And I don't know. It's just a completely different mindset that people just don't even realize or think about until they're in the situation.
You have to be so disciplined to create that.
Right.
And you have to be willing for there to be trade-offs. I think it's businesses and business owners, when you step into that ownership mentality and you feel the weight of the statement that if I'm not working, nobody is.
Right.
When you feel that weight, it can very easily become this integration where you can't ever disconnect. And I think that that's really unhealthy from my perspective, to not be able to disconnect and not be able to. But you are the one that sets that separation between work and between home, to be able to actually disconnect from work brain and actually engage with your family, engage with your spouse, engage with the people that you care about, and not be constantly answering emails or stepping outside for a quick phone call. But you're the one that creates that balance. And I've been a part of businesses that haven't created that and have just said, we just got to dig into it and just, this is what's expected of you. And I've been a part of ones like Monsoon where I've had to create that. You have to be so disciplined to create that. You have to have systems and processes in place that allow you to disconnect. I have to feel like we're ahead. I have to feel like we're on top of things. I have to feel like I can let go of all these plates that are spinning and none of them are going to fall before I wake up tomorrow. And that's what allows me to disconnect. And if I don't have systems in place and processes in place to where I can get to that, and I'm just letting life overwhelm me and I feel like I have to micromanage everything, so I'm constantly touching plates, then yeah, you're going to definitely feel a lack of work and home life balance for sure.
Like a good example of this is like my fiance and I. Like I don't know if anyone follows like the Enneagram that's listening to this, but we're both threes on the Enneagram. So we're both very driven people. We both want to work hard. We're both super career
and success oriented.
We love that. And so I love rooting her on in her career, and she cheers me on in mine, and it's great. But the difference is during like this pandemic, like she's been a little frazzled because there's been this like real lack of structure for her. She's an occupational therapy student, and all the universities have just been out of whack for the last 6 months. And so there hasn't been this like set structure for her. And it's been this real struggle to like figure out like a track for her to stay on so that it helps her keep balance in her life. And then she's always just like, how do you do that? You know, because I have to create my own structure.
Yep.
I get up whenever I want to get up. I show up to work whenever I want to show up. I do whatever I want, whenever I want, at all times, but I structure it in a way that actually moves the needle and gets things done. And it's just not even conceivable for some people. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think you have to, when you're becoming a business owner, there's a big difference between having a great business idea and being the one that can carry it and execute on it over an extended period of time. If you have a personality that is not into creating self-discipline, I don't think entrepreneurship is for you.
Right.
Because there isn't a boss. There isn't anybody above you. There isn't any pressure to get something done. I can go choose to not work today and no one's going to yell at me.
No.
Like, that's the danger. It's you have so much freedom and so much rope to run with that you can hang yourself with it. That's what being a business owner is. And finding that balance to where I understand what effort needs to happen and I'm setting good expectations with our clients on when something will get done, to where I'm not murdering us or our staff on turnaround times.
Sure. Right?
To actually allow there to be realistic expectations for me to have good work and home life balance. But self-discipline is a muscle that not a lot of people are taught. Right. You have people that are in high school and that go to college even, that are used to the structured life where they're expected to be at classes. They're expected to have their day kind of mapped out between be here at this time and here at this time and here at this time and do this. And then when they step out on their own and no one's setting that for them, it can be really difficult to create your own structure.
Right. And I think another thing that people don't think about near as much is the degree of magnitude in terms of consequences. So you don't have a boss that's going to yell at you if you take the afternoon off and go hang out with Rhonda and the kids.
Sure.
But if you do that every day, this business will collapse.
Sure.
And the degree of magnitude of those consequences are vastly greater than just getting fired from your job. If you get fired from your job that you're employed at, like, they're going to replace you.
Sure.
If your company collapses, your family, your partners' families, your employees' families, all of them are without an income.
Yep.
Or a source of income, or, you know, however their families are are handling things nowadays.
Yeah.
But it's the degree of magnitude so much greater, and that's what actually drives me to do the things that I do every day, and to get up early and to try and learn more and more and more about what we do, because if this thing fails, the degree of magnitude is so much greater. So yeah, as a business owner, you get so much freedom in the small things, but the consequences for us are vastly greater.
Yeah, it's a high risk, high reward. Anytime you start a business, it's going to be high risk, high reward, right? The opportunities and what I can do, my entire life isn't dependent on an hourly scale where I could only work X amount of hours in a year and I have a ceiling. And most employees have ceilings in terms of growth and what can happen. Business owners don't have ceilings, but that doesn't mean like I don't have a ceiling and I have freedom in my day. I don't have to tell somebody that I'm sick, I need to call in. I don't have to do those things. But I do have a complete risk of failure at any given moment, as we've seen with this pandemic and wiping out tons of businesses. Like, there is high risk and high reward for being the employer, not just the employee. But
absolutely. So, kind of out of left field, but for new guys that are trying to start their own companies, what advice do you have for developing that self-discipline? Like, what did you have to do when you were going from working at another agency or being a videographer into doing your own thing here with Monsoon, or even with Brand Native in Denver?
I honestly believe that you have to be passionate about what you're doing if you're going to start something from scratch. And you have an entrepreneurship mindset, that's great, but understand that on day one, when you launch your company, nobody cares.
Yep.
Like, you could have the best idea in the world. You are going to launch it in a vacuum, because the friends that you've talked about it with, your family that you've talked about it with, the people that are close to you, they care about your idea and your dream because they care about you.
Right, but the market does not.
The market doesn't care. Nobody outside of them cares, and it's on you, and that's a scary concept.
Right.
I love talking to people that are entrepreneurs that are trying to start their first business, because I love popping this balloon of an idea and all this momentum that they think they have.
Right.
Because it's only better for them to understand that when day one happens, no one cares.
Right.
And that feels harsh, but they don't. The market doesn't care. Unless you have a solution for somebody's problem, they don't care. And that's on you to not just talk about your great idea and how innovative it is. You have to talk about your solutions, and you have to be dedicated to it and understanding exactly what you need to put in to get out of it.
So you don't think that just anybody can do this? It has to really be a talent thing or a mindset thing, or you have to actually been built for it?
I think that anybody can start one. I don't think that anybody can be there 2 years from then.
Sure.
I don't think anybody can sustain it.
Yeah.
I think you have to be willing to fail, and you have to enjoy failure to be an entrepreneur. Because there's a lot of people that when it doesn't work out, it's an immediate hit on their identity. I'm a failure. I can't do this. I guess I'm going to go back to something safe. And that's okay.
Right.
I view business like I'm a little kid in a backyard and I'm playing with this model rocket, and I'm going to set it on the stand. I'm going to push the button. I'm going to try and launch it. And the first time that I push the button, it doesn't even lift off the stand. And some people stop there.
Right.
For me, I'm like, okay, let's take the rocket. What happened? What needs to change? How can I iterate on this and figure out why? And let's fix it. Okay. The problem wasn't this, it was this, and then figuring it out and setting it back on the stand again and going back again.
Right.
Even though it failed last time. And maybe this time it only raises an inch off the ground. But it's an inch more than it did before. And to me, that's successful business, is being excited about that inch.
Right.
And being willing to go back to the drawing board and change your process and change things to actually see it go, hundreds of feet in the air.
Right. And then sometimes in those moments, you realize, I'm not supposed to be making rockets. I'm supposed to be making launchers.
Right.
You go, oh, well, I'm actually better at this aspect of this business than this aspect of this business or industry. And then you realize, oh, I actually found my calling through my failure. And you just have to be able to be cool with that. Like for me, I don't personally enjoy failure at all. I don't like it. It frustrates me. Again, like we were talking last episode, I'm not the best at showing myself grace. So failure for me is actually really hard. But I actually overvalue growth. And I know that failure is a prereq for that. I am not going to get better at what I do. I'm not going to become a better expert, a better business owner, a better soon-to-be husband, anything, unless I fail at those things from time to time to grow and to be better at them.
Yeah.
So your failures are actually going to lead you into getting a higher return on your investment of time if you keep going. If you keep failing, if you keep growing, if you keep getting better, you keep improving. But I don't know, you have to have a real love for growth. And I totally feel you about, I love talking to new entrepreneurs when they're coming at you with ideas. And I was like in the perfect position to just get 1 million of those because I used to own an app company in the mid 2010s, and everyone has an app idea, right? And so everyone was coming to me with their app ideas, their business ideas, and some things is like, oh, that sounds cool. Like, how are you pulling that off? Who's making it? Like, who's selling it?
Right.
How are you marketing it? What's your demographic? What are their problems? Like, you break down all these things, and most people just don't know what to do there.
Yeah.
So
I've learned so much more about business, real business experience from failures than I have from successes.
Right.
Something can work, and there could be numerous reasons why it worked.
Right.
Normally when there's a failure, I can clearly see where pressure was placed on the business to a degree that something collapsed. A system collapsed. My product wasn't good enough. I have competitors that are doing it better. The price point's not matching. Like, I can find and usually isolate what caused that failure and really shore that up and learn from it. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I try and do business ideas all the time with different partnerships. And the partnerships that haven't worked out have actually taught me so much more about how to strengthen my business that I do have.
Right.
And really apply a lot of culture opportunities and who do we integrate and how dangerous cultures can become inside of workplace from a single addition to where it's toxic and not functioning anymore. Like, there are so many things I've learned from being a part of bad failures that I'm grateful for, and I still get treasure out of those moments compared to my successes.
Right. For sure. I mean, when I came into Monsoon, I really didn't bring all of my knowledge from my previous agency's successes over as much as I brought over all of my knowledge from my previous agency's failures. And so as we've been able to start scaling and grow as a business, I always had those failures in the back of my head. I'm like, okay, I've seen this before. I've run into this. So what can we do differently to steer the ship a little better so that we can avoid these pitfalls, Yeah. And I don't know, like, failure is just critical. So if you're starting a business for the first time, I think you need to temper your expectations.
100%.
I think that you need to learn to value growth, and that means learning to embrace failure. That doesn't mean, I think that means you have to have like positive vibes about failure, but I think that means that you're willing to go through the grime and the muck to get the prize, And so probably tempered expectations for sure is what I'd say for new business owners.
Yeah.
But it's super crazy. But this podcast has been super fun. I can't believe we're already on episode 5. Like, it just felt like we took so long to get episode 1 out, and now we're on the 5th one.
Just a lot of momentum, yeah.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been a good time, and planning these has been great, and coming up with formats and different things we can try has been good. So I've really enjoyed it, but we got a lot of really cool feedback about the last episode because we jumped into another one of our branding exercise spectrums, which we're going to do another one of those today. But we also, on the fly, came up with this game where I just shotgunned a bunch of brands at you, and you told me where they fell on that spectrum. And so I think we're going to kind of flesh that format out a little more. So I'm real stoked on it. But today, we're talking about modern and high-tech brands versus classic and traditional brands. Would you like to give me a definition and examples of both of those things?
Yeah, when we walk people through this branding exercise, this one is one of the ones that people require a lot of explanation on.
Sure.
Because when you hear modern and high tech, these brands are very avant-garde, very forward-thinking. They are trying to push their industry forward.
Right.
And yet you can see modern and high tech can sometimes be aesthetically, but with high tech, it's kind of about how you're implementing your company in terms of technology as well. So when you're talking about high tech versus classic and traditional, it can be somewhat aesthetic, but it's really more about your methods and how you're accomplishing things and the services aspect of it. are you doing things different than your competitors, or are you doing things the same way that's been done for 50 years?
Right.
A much more traditional and classic approach to your company. So the classic and traditional side, there's so many things and so many brands that carry a very classic value, has this timeless piece to it,
Right.
that it doesn't need to be modern. We're good because we're always been good, and there's quality that's here. And so I think like classic and traditional brands are much more like Rolex, for example. They carry this timelessness to them. There's always value. While I would say like a value of a high-end piece, more like Lamborghini or Ferrari, that they've always pushed themselves towards new models that are coming out and being at the very, very top and the very front, even though they have this big history. I think they really push this high-tech, modern trend for a lot of their cars and that they put out.
Nice. Yeah, very good. So yeah, I mean, it's super interesting thinking about brands that kind of fit along both of these spectrums. Like you mentioned, Rolex. They're a timeless, traditional company, and even though people recognize that, and that's kind of where they derive a lot of their value from. It's like we've been here for 50 years, and we make the best watch on the planet, and it's luxury and it's great. It's actually starting to bite them in the foot right now because they just released the new 2020 line of Rolex watches, and people are really annoyed about it because they look like they've always looked. Like they're expecting this big reveal, and like the Submariner looks like it did back in the 1960s. I mean, it looks almost the same. And people are going, man, you guys are just putting the same thing out over and over and over and over again. And eventually this classic traditional thing is starting to get kind of tired on a lot of the people that are enthusiasts. Yeah. And so it's super interesting to kind of see how there are some actual real pitfalls with both of these paradigms.
Yeah, it depends on your demographics. I think with the Rolex, the people that appreciated that look are aging out a little bit, and the people that are new and are wanting to get Rolexes don't have an understanding of their history, or I would say a nostalgia towards their history, an emotional response that enjoys that timeless piece. Because I think that when you go classic and traditional, it can really create this comforting nostalgia. It's the way that it's always been. Kind of how I would describe it is you can have like modern and high-tech brands be like these Thai fusion cuisine places that are really mixing and matching and kind of destroying convention with how food should be prepared. And they're taking Thai food and Japanese food and they're mixing it together. And it's almost like you're butchering history because they're being so modern. And there are people that are going to be offended. Talking about pitfalls of a modern one, there are certain people that will not take kindly to what you're doing with their culture, with their cuisine, but they're really pushing things forward. Compared to classic and traditional Italian food, this is my grandma from Italy. This is her exact recipe. We would never change it because it's that good. And there's something that we're carrying history and a legacy and longevity here that's important to us. So you have grandma's great-great-grandma's pasta who immigrated over from Italy versus this new fusion cuisine that I've never seen before, where, you know, it's Thai sushi or something that's crazy that I've never experienced. And there's a fun energy momentum side where we're breaking rules and we're a little rebellious when we're modern and high-tech versus this classic and traditional, which we really toe the line and we toe history. We understand our legacy and where we came from, and there's no need to change because we're that good.
Right, for sure. So kind of like last time, I'm going to rattle off some brands, and we're just going to discuss whether they're modern and high-tech, classic and traditional, why that is, and what we think about it.
Sure.
Awesome. I'm going to participate as well. So Coca-Cola, I would say, is a classic and traditional brand.
Yes. Mostly because they've not changed their logo in over a century, something like that.
Right.
A very, very long time. And I think that their recipe even, they tried to launch out like New Coke at one point, and people just did not appreciate it, and they had to swap back. And I think that you have this recipe that people are used to, and they have learned very dramatically not to mess with their recipe, not to mess with their logo. People love, people trust it. It's classic and traditional.
For sure. I had this super crazy thing happen to me about 10 years ago. I took a trip out to Uganda, and we went to this really, really remote village. We were doing just a hodgepodge of like mission and humanitarian work. We were out there for a while.
Okay.
And I needed to pee super bad, and I was just like, I can't hold it. I'm having a problem here. And so I actually kind of waded out into the bush a little bit to kind of get out of sight. And while I was on my way out there, I stepped on this like crumpled tin metallic something, and I was like, what in the world is this? And I looked down, and it is this super, 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 super old Coca-Cola sign.
Wow.
And I was just like, Coca-Cola got way, way out here a long time ago. And it's just insane. Coca-Cola has been doing their thing for a long time. They are the, in my mind, the definition of a classic brand.
Yes.
It's in their name, Coca-Cola Classic. When they try to innovate, like with the new Coke thing they tried doing like a long time ago, it was just a huge flop. So I don't know. It just kind of fits into that.
Yeah, definitely classic and traditional.
Tried and true, been going for a long time. What about FedEx?
Oh, FedEx has been around a long time. Maybe just talk about longevity of them being there, and even their logo when it was created several decades back. One of my favorite logos by far. Easily. I think one of the best uses of negative space in a very timeless logo as far as the arrow.
Yeah. If you've never noticed in the FedEx logo, in between the E and the X at the end of the logo, the E and the X touch each other and actually make an arrow with that negative space. A lot of people haven't noticed that.
Yeah, once you see it, you can't unsee it. But I would say they're really trying very hard to be more modern and high tech. I just had something delivered. It was like the box had been thoroughly beaten up and destroyed through the process of it. So I don't know that they've perfectly perfected, especially in the middle of a pandemic, how much shipping has been going on. But as far as if they're modern and high tech or classic and traditional, I'd say they're classic and traditional still to me, but they're attempting to sway their brand more modern and high tech. Sure.
I'm gonna throw an extra one in here. The United States Postal Service.
Oh, definitely classic and traditional.
Right.
Like FedEx is clearly more modern or more high tech than USPS, but I mean, you think the United States Postal Service, you're thinking about guys riding horses with letters in their bag.
Right.
It's classic and traditional for sure.
For sure. Tesla.
Modern and high tech.
I think it's super interesting though because they're named after such a classic, timeless inventor.
Yes.
So they kind of have to ride that line a little bit with their name, but everything about their identity is modern and high tech, and about all the stuff they put in their cars that you don't find anywhere else.
Yeah, I think when you say Tesla, where they draw inspiration from is from a classic and timeless pioneer in electricity. And I think that when you actually see it applied, it's in a very modern and high-tech space where they're removing fossil fuels from cars and creating electric vehicles of the future. I think they're just now started talking about, Elon just came out and was talking about their 1,000,000-mile car battery. And that's his promise, is that this thing's going to be good for 1,000,000 miles.
1,000,000 miles.
Yeah, I just saw that last night. So you talk about modern and high tech, and they think that they're on the cusp of actually having something like that.
Well, how many miles does the average American drive?
I don't know. Most cars, I don't think, make it to 250K.
That's crazy. Like, can you imagine having your car? Can you imagine having your car for like 20 years?
No.
That's got to be something like that has to be the ballpark what that is.
No, if it makes me feel like it's like the Nokia phone of cars.
Yeah.
Where the old Nokia brick, that thing was like outlast, World War and still be functional and working. Like if you're promising 1,000,000 miles, your car parts better live up to that. I just feel like your entire chassis is going to fail before your battery will.
For sure. Absolutely. Apple.
Modern and high tech.
I agree. I can definitely agree with that. It's kind of hard with some of these computer companies.
Yep.
Because they were at the beginning of it. So what is classic and traditional for a computer company?
Like IBM.
Okay.
feels classic and traditional to me. They're no fluff, non-aesthetic. They're not really they don't go out of their way to tell you that they're pushing the industry forward. They're just solid and stable, and they've been that way, and they'll always be that way.
Okay, that's a super good point. McDonald's.
Man. They're the OGs of burger joints and fast food. They're the ones that caused fast food to really be a thing. So there's a classic and traditional piece to them. It feels like a FedEx to me almost. Like they're doing something
They operate
all over the world.
Right.
You have to be modern and high tech to accomplish that kind of scalability and growth. And I don't know. I'm mixed on that one. I think that they carry both. They'd be a tension brand to me.
Yeah, some of these operate within real tension points, which just to kind of remind everyone, a tension point is when we set these, we set like a spectrum like modern and high tech and classic and traditional, and we try and get a client to pick one or the other. And sometimes the brand really does need to go in between those. It needs to be both. And so some of these will operate with and tension points. But
what do you think about McDonald's?
Oh, man, I'm gonna go with classic and traditional because again, I think it's not who they say their brand is, it's who we say their brand is.
Sure.
And in my mind, they're just like you said, the OGs of fast food. So they've got to be they're a classic and traditional brand, and they're really not trying to put themselves out there, I think, as modern and high tech. I think they operate modern and high tech. But I don't know if everyone's considering that or thinking about that when they're thinking about going to McDonald's.
Yeah, there are so many there's so many things I think McDonald's is trying to do right now, especially with automation, where there are lots of fast food restaurants that you go in and you can straight up not even have to interact with a cashier anymore. I can place my entire order through these big kiosk panels that you're not seeing really anywhere else. And then I think that I've seen several photos. I'll throw one up online, or just for the people that are video watching.
Post-production, Caleb, throw it up.
I will throw it up. There are several videos where you have these older ladies who are used to interacting, and they like McDonald's have these drive-up mobile order spots where you can just go pick up food now. And I've seen several videos of older people going up and actually pushing the sign, like the metal aluminum sign that has the phone on it, to start placing their order, because they're not used to that and they think it's going to start their order that way. So I think that you have a classic and traditional people who have been going to McDonald's for decades, who are trying to figure out how to navigate McDonald's in a high-tech space.
Interesting.
So I think that I don't know of any other fast food company that's putting up tons of kiosks and wanting you to not have to interact with their cash registers.
I'll concede on that one because your boy doesn't eat a lot of McDonald's, so I haven't seen a lot of that. But
they're doing tons of stuff on the inside to keep going with automation. And to be honest, I think it's a move, not to dig too deep, but I think it's a move to protect against potential minimum wage increases. And if they don't need to have someone who's messing up an order and I can do it myself, I think they're really just embracing this self-order, self-checkout trend that's happening right now.
For sure. Pepsi.
Classic and traditional.
Classic and traditional. For a lot of the same reasons that Coca-Cola is as well. Microsoft.
I would put them as classic and traditional as well, especially compared to Apple.
I think they've recently become modern and high tech.
How recently?
Well, they actually just completely redid their brand identity within the last decade. I mean, they used to just always have just a kind of like the same classic and traditional, not pushing boundaries kind of vibe about them, but within the last decade, I've seen their brand identity completely shift. Their logo changed up. They actually created Microsoft stores. And I think a lot of it's also because they're the ones that are putting out like the biggest or one of the biggest game systems out there as well.
Sure. So, I mean, Microsoft just spent $7.5 billion on buying a game studio.
Bethesda? Yeah.
Bethesda?
I don't know anything about games. I am so sorry.
Everyone shame him in the comments. No, it's Bethesda. But
Bethesda.
They just bought it for $7.5 billion. And just to put that in comparison, because it's kind of hard to even think about that number, Disney bought Star Wars for $4 billion.
Okay.
So Microsoft just purchased a game studio for almost double that. Compared to Star Wars, that's pretty crazy to even think about what it's doing. It's kind of sending shockwaves through the industry. So yeah, I could see a case for modern and high tech.
So are we saying that the Doom guy is more valuable than Luke Skywalker?
That's what we're saying.
Oh my gosh.
I think that here's the problem, though. When you think about any time Microsoft has taken a trend out into tech,
Yeah.
not just operating systems, which I think they're killer at. They crush it in terms of OS. But when you're talking about tech, I still don't think what they're putting out is really pushing the industry forward at all. Not their laptops. I mean, Xbox, sure. I think that from a hardware perspective, they've kind of caught up this generation. But I still feel like even their new logo just feels like a reskin of Windows XP. It feels like a reskin of Windows 95. Like, it feels like it's still that dated, and they just put a fresh coat of paint, and they're trying to tell me they are, but I don't know that I'm seeing it in execution.
I think they're definitely anchored in their old branding, just like Apple is. You know, the Apple logo has evolved over time, and I don't think that they're really pushing anything forward back in the 2000s. But I think in the 2010s, I think they've definitely made strides. You've actually got innovations happening with their laptops that aren't really happening with MacBooks right now, like touchscreens. People wanting a touchscreen MacBook forever. They want something they can interact with the Apple Pencil. They want all of that, and Microsoft's implementing all of it. They've got their tablet laptop hybrid that a lot of people love, the Surface, I think it's called. So I don't know. I think they've really moved towards being more modern and high tech within the last few years.
Maybe it's just me and my personal experience with them.
Sure.
I remain unconvinced. I think that whenever I see Microsoft trying to be hip and trendy, all I see is the keynote where you have Bill Gates and a bunch of other guys literally dancing. I think it was Windows XP when they announced it, or it was Windows 95. One of the two. They're literally on stage, and it's a bunch of guys in sweater vests and sweaters like dancing to this tune because they're so excited about the launch of their new operating system. And it's the corniest, goofiest, like dad joke-ist like moment. You compare that to like an Apple keynote.
Sure.
It's polished and pristine, has gravitas and weight to it, and then you just have these guys like super jazzed that their programming is about to launch and hit the button. It feels kooky to me, you know?
I don't know. I think that Microsoft is just going to have such a hard time shedding their vibe of like obsolescence, I think, in culture. I mean, not to get super into the weeds on like coronavirus or everything, but Bill Gates has been doing a whole lot to work with vaccines, and there was a bajillion memes that have come out over the last several months. They're like, Bill Gates, what do you mean you're going to work on coronavirus? You couldn't even protect Windows 98 from viruses. You
exactly.
couldn't even, so people remember, whether he owns the company or not.
Sure.
What gets you viruses and what doesn't? I don't know. It's nuts. But I really do think they've made strides towards being more modern and high tech recently.
Sure.
But I would definitely say classic and traditional beforehand. Sony
feels modern and high tech to me.
Yeah.
Yep.
What about them?
The aesthetic, for sure. And to be honest, they've had that aesthetic for a little bit. But I think that Sony's always really been very minimalistic in terms of aesthetics. And even their logo and the way that they carry their branding and how they launch it out there, it feels very modern and very high tech. But they've also been around a really long time. And I think that they play really well off of their history and look at where we've come from. So it could be another tension brand to me, but just from my gut, I feel like it leans more towards modern and high tech to me.
Yeah, I think that they feel really modern and high tech as well, especially with like the new like PS5 coming out and seeing how the design turned out. Like it looks just super.
It's very
weird.
Organically shaped instead of boxy and geometric like Xbox is, which they really lean into the box part of the Xbox.
Well, it's in the name, so you get to get away with it.
But Sony came out with this very like Eye of Sauron, duck bill level aesthetic that's going on that a lot of people thought it just looked like a binder.
It looks like two Pringles put together, or like
two pieces of paper taped to a router.
Two paper plates.
Exactly.
Stacked together.
So people definitely fired some shots at Sony about the aesthetics of their new thing. But to me, that makes them modern. They're not playing it safe. They're trying new things, and they're getting a lot of data off of people. Probably should have done a little bit more data gathering before locking in that design based on the response.
What do you think about Facebook?
I'm going to turn this around on you. What do you think about Facebook?
I struggle with this one because they were kind of the very, very beginning of the social media age.
Sure.
So it's interesting to kind of talk about like what's modern and high tech and what's classic and traditional. We're talking about industries that are barely over 10 years old. So I mean, for Facebook, they kind of feel classic to me. They've always had their blue, the F logo, until recently the UI hasn't really even changed dramatically that much. You know, it's definitely been spruced up and it's looked better over the years, but it hasn't been like, it's Facebook. Recently, they did this huge UI shift where everything looks completely different. It reminds me a lot of Twitter. But I don't know. When I think of Facebook and Twitter, to me, they feel classic and traditional in context of the industry they're in.
Sure.
I'm not saying that they're not modern and high tech. And that's the hard part. Because modern and high tech wasn't really a thing when Coca-Cola and McDonald's was coming up. They didn't have the option to be modern and high tech. They're just doing their thing, and they've become classic and traditional. But Facebook's like in an industry that actually started during the modern and high tech era.
Right.
So that's where I really struggle with some of these tech companies, because most of these brands modern and high tech wasn't an option, but for Sony and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, they've been around for 10 years. They've been around since really the beginning of social media, since the beginning of the industry starting. But it was all because we're in this like modern high tech era. So
yeah.
I don't even know if they'll have the opportunity to be classic and traditional, or if they just get both.
There comes a point in every single industry when technology like stimulates your industry. Like technology comes in and some new innovation happens and people will early adopt it and they will begin to grow. And you see these classic and traditional companies, and I would put this forward that another big thing about classic and traditional companies is that they do not feel the need to ever change their methods or how they do it. Like I said, the way that grandma rolled out the pasta, that's how we're going to roll out the pasta. It doesn't matter to them that there's a pasta making machine, the Pasta Maker 5000 that came out that can rattle out 2,000 of these a minute. That doesn't matter to them. They're going to take the old by hand approach. They don't care about technology and what's happening. They have something really good going on. The problem is when your consumers stop caring about that, like
Right.
you're seeing with Rolex, like you saw with Blockbuster and Netflix, people stopped caring and actually began to get irritated with this model of going in and renting a physical VHS and having to go turn it back in themselves. And they hated this model of late fees. And it really was Blockbuster's lack of desire to change their model to a Netflix that caused them to die. And Netflix came in, early adopted it. Hey, we're going to send DVDs to your house and you can just send it back through the mail. It was this huge innovation. I didn't even have to leave my house, And I think that that's going to happen in every industry. I'm honestly really excited to see it happen in construction, to see it happen in a lot more of these blue collar spaces that are extremely tech resistant. And I've already heard a little bit from friends who are out in construction, out in Denver and other places, that they have these younger firms of people that are showing up, giving digital proposals, actually nailing deadlines and timelines, and giving very easy digital access to blueprint changes and things that are big problem areas for construction spaces right now. From this is the way my dad did it, this is the way my grandpa did it, older construction companies that just have their old methods and they don't feel like they need construction. There comes a point in your industry that you have to be aware when technology happens and accelerate towards it. And so to just tie that into Facebook a little bit, I don't think Facebook is innovative. Facebook as itself isn't innovative. What Facebook does is it purchases other innovative companies and attaches it to itself.
Right.
Like Facebook's looking over at Instagram and they're like, oh, that's awesome. And they snap it up. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
You have this... Facebook looks over what Oculus or the VR company is doing and they go and snap that up. Like there's these things and these pioneers that are innovating in their space, and Facebook is like, I like that, you become me. I like that, you become me.
Sure.
And so to me, they still feel classic, traditional.
Right.
To me.
I could agree with that. And especially when you look at what Facebook did to Snapchat. They tried to buy Snapchat. Snapchat didn't want to sell. And so they're like, okay, well, we're going to put stories on our platform and Instagram. So now both of our companies have your biggest feature, So I don't really feel like they're that innovative either.
No.
So yeah, for them, I'd say some of these just have to be tension brands just because of the era we're in. And I think that we're going to have that happening more and more just as companies are born in this time frame, just because you've always known modern and high tech. It's always been a thing.
Modern and high tech companies are going to be more progressive. They're going to be so much more open to inserting the best technology that's available at the time into their company and constantly progressing. You're going to have classic and traditional companies that are going to be a lot more conservative. And this is the way we've always done it. It's the way we're always going to do it. And so there is a level of innovation that inherently comes with being a modern and high tech company. And there's a level of comfort that comes with classic and traditional that people know it. It's always going to be that. It's like Levi's jeans. Right. Like I can go to Walmart and buy a pair of Levi's that, to be honest, outside of some small little changes, it's pretty much the same pair of pants that my dad. Yep. Like my dad can go buy the exact same pair of pants he's been buying his entire life from Levi's. Mm-hmm. The fit, everything, he knows what he's getting. It's Levi's, like they're not needing to necessarily innovate. Now they have some small side ones where they are making skinny jeans. They're making more elastic material that's still denim. And like they are doing some small stuff, but they never change that foundation of what made them good and the people that are there. So,
absolutely. Google. This is an interesting one because they've been around since the start of everything internet-wise. Like they've been around basically the whole time as long as I can remember. Yeah,
there was that one spider search engine. It was like Netcrawler or Web Crawler or something like that.
Yeah, it was like Netscape Navigator. Or was that a browser? Was that a browser?
There was like Ask Jeeves.
Ask Jeeves.
There were some search engines that tried to make it during that time, and Google just dominated them with its simplicity.
Whatever happened to Jeeves?
I don't know. We should ask him.
We should definitely.
Jeeves, what happened? You just find him in a bar and ask Jeeves. Hey, Jeeves, what happened, man?
Oh, my gosh.
I think for Google, Google feels modern and high tech to me. Okay. I don't think they executed on it super well, but they're modern and high tech. For example, Google Glass. Nobody else was doing tech eyewear.
No.
That thing launched, and it sounded really cool on paper.
And no one's done it.
No one's done it since. Exactly. Right. I think they were way, way, way ahead of what the market even wanted. Right. We're barely getting into wearables, like in terms of like smartwatches and stuff. And there's still people that are adopting it. I mean, this is becoming huge on a watch place. I don't see any reason why not to get into this space eventually, but Google tried to be modern, tried to push the industry forward, and definitely felt the pain and honestly ridicule of Google Glass as a moment. There was entire huge problems where restaurants weren't allowing Google Glass wearers into them, and there's just a very big pushback culturally to having something so invasive just being attached to your head and not knowing whether someone's recording you or not. It's just from a culture standpoint, I don't think we were ready for that.
I think that Google is without a doubt a tension point brand, more so than Facebook, more so than Sony or Microsoft or Apple, because you don't become a verb without being a classic and traditional brand.
Sure.
I know that across the country, everyone has got a different word for like soda, but here in Texas, everyone says, I want a Coke. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter if it's...
And then they'll follow that up with what kind of Coke.
Right, what kind of Coke do you want? And that Coke could be...
Dr. Pepper.
Dr. Pepper, Coca-Cola, Sprite, Pepsi, Mountain Dew. What kind of Coke do you want? But Coke is the verb. And it's because Coca-Cola has established themselves as that classic and traditional brand. And we do that with Google. I'm going to Google that. No one's like... Yeah, I guess people say I'm going to look that up, but I'll Google it.
I'll Bing it.
I'll Bing it.
Hold on, I'll be back. I need to Bing that.
Oh my gosh.
It doesn't really carry the same vibe. It's the same thing with Kleenex. As far as tissues are concerned, Kleenex is just the generic. You're going to get a Kleenex for that brand.
We talked about Tesla. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about another company named after a famous inventor, Ford.
Sure. Well, it's named after him because he invented them.
Right.
But Ford, for sure.
Precisely.
Ford feels classic and traditional. I think they lean heavily into that. Even when they're innovating, they're always showing pictures of the first Ford auto. They lean heavy classic and traditional, that there's a reliability. And granted, there's tons of memes depending on the people. If you're a Chevy person, you hate Ford. If you're a Ford person, you hate Chevy. Ford stands for found on road dead. I mean, I've heard all the comments about it from different people who meme on it. But the reality is they're allowed to have that kind of rivalry because they've been around forever.
Sure.
So to me, they feel classic and traditional. And there is a reliability that people look for when they buy Ford. They're buying American. I'm buying here. I'm supporting. There's a patrioticness to Ford, and I think that it's a really important piece of their brand is that stability, that classic. We've always made good cars. We're always going to continue to make good cars.
Sure.
It feels like Ford to me.
Yeah, when my dad passed away, I actually made the choice to give my current vehicle to my mom so she could use it as a trade-in, and I took my dad's F-150 that he bought a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I sit in it, I think of all the times that I sat in his old F-150 that he had from forever ago. And so when I think of Ford, I think of them as being classic and traditional because when you sit behind the wheel of an F-150, you're in an F-150.
Mm-hmm.
His that I inherited has got a touchscreen and a backup camera and all the bells and the whistles and the navigation, and it beeps when I get too close to something. And those are all great technological innovations, and they probably came up with a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're sitting in an F-150.
Sure.
I would say they're definitely classic and traditional.
Yeah, I think the problem with classic and traditional brands is you can really screw up by innovating too much. Like, if they change it around the entire dash, the way that things are, the feel of an F-150, people are going to know. And you're going to offend the base of people that are constant F-150 purchasers. So I think that when you're playing classic and traditional, you really need to understand what people actually care about, what gives them that emotional, nostalgic response, and to not mess with that, but then to just continue to make that even better with technology, but never harm it, right? So
Sure. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about not just the brands of the companies themselves, but also the brands that their products carry. And so whenever I was thinking about, I was coming with this list earlier, and I was thinking about Apple and Google, and yeah, Google's always had the modern and high tech. We're innovating, we're pushing things forward. And Google, again, to me, feels like a classic and traditional brands, but they both put out very different UIs and operating systems when it comes to like their phones.
Sure.
So I think that the iPhone and Androids definitely carry completely different brands as well. Do you think that iPhone is classic and traditional or modern and high tech?
iPhones have always been modern ever since that first launch. They were the ones that first started it out in terms of being really high tech. They're the first ones to really take a phone concept and really push it forward into it can carry all of these things in it at once. There were other people that had, BlackBerries and other phones around that time that would do functional things, but they weren't meant to be this clean app interface that first iPhone really brought with it. Yet, I think Apple wants to tell you that they're modern and high tech, but to be honest, for the past 5 to 7 years, Android's been doing it better and has had better innovations, better features, better things that Apple is still constantly slowly adding into their things. So to me, especially when you're just talking about mobile operating systems, classic and traditional, they try not to change it up too much. So I don't know that they feel innovative in terms of modern and high tech on a phone.
Sure. I think that I just don't feel like the iOS operating system has really changed that much. I think they've gone with different vibes. I think I remember the old iPhones had a lot more realism to them, versus more like abstraction. But I don't feel like iOS has changed up too much. And like you said, Android has just been coming out with all kinds of crazy features for a long time. I mean, depending on what phone you get, you can watch 2 YouTube videos at one time on your screen, or you can just do all these crazy weird things that you can't pull off on an iPhone.
Right.
And so I think it's kind of interesting that the modern and high tech brand has got a very classic and traditional phone, and they're not pushing boundaries, but the classic and traditional tech company is pushing probably the more modern, high tech, pushing the boundaries product.
Yeah, I would say that comes down to Apple's philosophy. Apple loves control.
Okay.
That's the reality of Apple, is that they are modern and high tech, but they love control.
Okay.
So Apple will not, with their computers, let you really change a ton of stuff. It's not supposed to be customizable. I'm not supposed to go order aftermarket parts and fit it to my computer or my phone. Their devices are meant to ride till you die. And when they die, you get a new one, right? And yet Google, on the other hand, has a much more modular customization focus with their devices, where if I look at an Apple phone that's not jailbroken, I know it's Apple. There's no changing it. really that person has such limited control outside of the background wallpaper.
Yeah.
Again, whether their apps are in photos or not, there's really
Sure.
not a lot of customization or self-expression that Apple really wants you to have. Their operating system is locked down. You can only install things from the App Store. You cannot do anything outside of their ecosystem or their parts.
But it keeps the experience good.
Exactly, and that's what they care about. That's why the resaleability of an Apple product is still so much more than a Google one. You know, if I have a a Surface computer versus a MacBook Pro, and I age them 5 years, and I go and try and sell them, I promise you the Apple will have retained more value than the Surface will have in that same amount of time.
Even if the Surface has more features.
Exactly. Even if that people know what they're buying, and there's a consistency that comes with that. But I think that when you talk about that change between modern and high tech and classic and traditional, it's really about control versus customization. And Apple keeps everything on lock, while Google, Droid, etc., they keep everything really open for you to customize it however you want and deal with the problems of your customization too. So
Right. Super crazy. Well, that's the end of my list.
yeah,
So that was super fun. I like that. I'm really interested to keep refining that format with some of these.
sure.
But we actually have a question from Casey Bartlett. So I put out some feelers several months back when we were really getting serious about launching the podcast. And I basically asked all of my family and my friends and my audience, what do you guys want to hear out of a brand podcast with you and I?
Sure.
And I got a lot of great feedback. And Casey put this. She's been in the design and brand and the creative industry for a long time. She's great. And she says, I'd like to hear about the importance of being appealing but not being trendy. Trendy design is most designers' worst nightmare. Sure, it's fun to do, but it's not fun? A rebrand every 5 years. Base a brand on your core values. Know your why. Believe in your product. Have a vision of how you want people to experience your product and build the brand from there. If you look at some of the most well-known brands, they've had the least redesigns. I mean, Coca-Cola barely tweaked their logo 40 years ago, and their messaging has been consistent. So, appealing but not trendy. What do you think?
I think that as a designer, 100% there's a piece of me that understands not being trendy. I think as a marketing person, understanding trends and knowing what's appealing right now and having the ability to navigate that space is important. Now, when she's talking about in a brand sense of completely rebranding your company vision and basing your company's design and logo and core identity off of trends, that's dangerous for sure. But I think a big reason that Coca-Cola barely tweaked their logo, Pepsi barely tweaked their logo, is the spread that their brand had.
Mm.
Their brand touched so many people, and when you are nationwide and people are aware and have touched you and know what your logo looks like on the shelves, and you're in this kind of food industry space, it becomes much more difficult to change course. When you're talking to smaller companies that are really only local or regional, it's not as big of an issue to change your brand or to update things because there aren't as many people that are touching it or aware of that. And you're not really losing as much when you change trends or when you change your logo. But from a cost perspective, for sure, you definitely don't want to be rebranding every 5 years from cost. You're not really building that brand equity. Having a deep-seated understanding of who your company is and what really matters and finding a logo that's timeless and works for you, it could be the move for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree. What do you think makes a logo or a brand identity timeless?
The fact that you haven't changed it in a long time.
Well, yeah.
In a small way. But the reason that you don't have to change it is that, again, it's that spread. People are used to that product. You don't have to change.
Do you think it could be the simplicity of what makes that logo up, like the fonts? Do you think that there are some timeless fonts and some fonts that aren't? At one point, Papyrus and Comic Sans were cool, and now if anyone ever mentions using those fonts, designers want to throw up in their mouths.
Definitely.
No one's touching those fonts anymore because they're extremely dated, because they follow this weird, complicated, super trendy aesthetic thing, and no one wants to associate with those fonts anymore But then you have some fonts that have incredible staying power, like Futura, Times New Roman,
Helvetica.
Gotham, Helvetica, that have been on everything. Bebas. There's just so many different fonts, and those are what I usually think of when I'm thinking about, like, I want to create a timeless logo for this company. What do I know that already has staying power, right? So I'm immediately thinking about these classic fonts. Like, what can I create this logo out of that hopefully is not going to need a big crazy redesign in the next 10, 15 years. So I kind of wonder if what makes something like appealing but not trendy is what you make the logo out of.
Sure. There are pieces of how you build a logo that I would say transcend mediums. Like having a logo that works in a square format versus a rectangular format. Having a logo that works in print and in digital. Like if your designer is careful and thoughtful and strategic with your logo design, you should have elements that work regardless of the size, scope, medium, print, digital, etc.
Versatility is key.
Versatility is very key to allowing your logo to work across the board. And I think that that helps you not have to change it around a ton. Sometimes you have to change it because your logo was only designed in a horizontal format and you tried to squish it into a square one and it just doesn't work anymore and you don't understand how to do it. And so you need to navigate a new design that's come out. But as far as trends are concerned, trends to me feel cyclical. The more that I paid attention to it, the more that I've seen the things that were cool in design back in the 70s, back in the 80s, are resurfacing right now, like because they're vintage and it's cool to do a vintage design now. And so as far as what is trendy, what's in the moment, in the 80s, it was new, it was fresh, that was their thing. But now I'm starting to see in terms of design, people that are really digging back in time and doing modern design is vintage. And they're like playing off of these old things that used to look that way. And they're playing off of demographics that are looking for that and excited about it. To where, to me, it always feels cyclical right now, you know?
So do you think that Papyrus and Comic Sans are making a resurgence soon?
I think for people that are trying to create a nostalgic feel, using Papyrus or Comic Sans is a great way to potentially do that. I don't think that it's great for corporate design. I don't think it's great for bigger pieces of it. But as far as trends and following trends, I think it just continues to come back around.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying. I just think that there are so many businesses that are just going to have to go through massive redesigns because there's following what's cute and cool right now. Something that comes into my mind would be photography company logos. It's always like first name, middle name, photography, and some like cursive script font that no one can read.
Yep.
And it doesn't have staying power.
Sure.
And so eventually these photography companies are going to either die off or they're going to need to eventually rebrand and do something else and update it. And it could be really expensive for them. So
I think it's very rare outside of physical space studios that have a much more serious clientele base. I think it's very rare, just photography as an industry.
Sure.
I don't think a lot of photographers have staying power. I think it's a fun little hobby thing that people play around with for 3 to 5 years when they're in college and they're having fun and they're getting a little side money and it feels good and I can make some shoots and I'm an artist. And I just think, to be honest, like most photographers and their brands, I have a hard time thinking through people that haven't built a studio and committed to it as a lifelong position. I would say they're in the minority. I would put 10 to 15% of total photographers in America have actual desires to be a photographer past the 5-year mark or 10-year mark and really commit to it. And I think that you have a ton of hobbyists that flood the space and are willing to do senior portraits and, you know, I'll shoot your wedding for sure. And that have more of those scripty logos that they're just riding the wave of what's current. They're not really trying to build something lasting.
I get you for sure. Great. Well, I think that's all the time we actually have for today.
Sweet.
So I'm going to go ahead and land the plane.
Sure. Before you land the plane, I just want to say thank you so much for sending questions in. Casey, thank you for your question. And we would love to get even more. Reach out to Travis, reach out to me, reach out to the Disruption and Kindness Facebook page. Like, we really do want your questions.
Absolutely. Well, I'll go ahead and do the outro.
Hit it.
Thank you so much for listening to us and supporting us so far. You can subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Stay tuned for weekly episodes dropped fresh every Friday.
So fresh.
So fresh. Also, don't forget to like us on Facebook. We're going to be doing a lot of community building where we take your questions and discuss them later in the show. Something we're definitely wanting to do is we're wanting to start chopping up some of these episodes and putting them out and clips, so they're kind of a little more easier to consume. And so we're really excited about that. And so it'd be a good way to build some community and get some questions and get some discussions going. But yeah, we're really excited to keep making awesome content for you guys. We love your feedback, even your negative feedback. And yeah, stay tuned for more Disruption and Kindness. Episode 006 drops next Friday. We love you guys. Thanks.